Hey, this is Vu, and today I'm going to be making part 2 of my op guide, and this one's going to be about aggressive opping. And aggressive opping, in my mind, is by far, if done correctly, the most impactful playstyle you can have out there. Now, the only problem with aggressive opping is that it's very high variance and you have very little room for error here, because if you're aggressively opping as opposed to passively opping, where if you miss a shot you're probably going to be close to a wall, you can fall right back. If you're aggressively opping, a lot of the time you're going to be out in the middle of the open trying to go for a pick, maybe on a rifle or that type of thing. You miss that shot, you are dead a lot of the time if you miss a shot in the wrong moment, and you have to be very, very confident here, but you have to be very aware. If you're having a bad game, maybe you need to switch it up fairly quickly. So going right into what actually you need to know in terms of mechanics, the main mechanic you're going to know or need to learn here for aggressive opping is what I'll call the crouch peek. And this might not be what some of you kind of acknowledge as the crouch peek, but what I'm calling the crouch peek here is you come around a corner, crouch as soon as you get around the corner, and scope in as you crouch. And this is one of the things that makes it so high variance and so low margin for error really here as an opper. Look how narrow this angle is I'm trying to peek. You can see I've aggressively opped for years, and I still can't get this every single time. You have very, very little margin for error if you do this correctly, where you're trying to peek a narrow angle and get a perfect peek on them. You scope in at the right time, so you need to have good crosshair positioning blankly through a wall, and you need to be able to scope in immediately, get this peek correctly, and peek in. And the reason you want to be good at crouch peeking is because this is specifically against oppers, although you want to do this against riflers as well, but it's primarily for use against oppers, where an opper's holding an angle and you utilize your peeker's advantage to the best extent you can, where basically what you're doing when you crouch peek onto someone's screen is you're basically teleporting onto their screen. And not only that, but then they're going to have to adjust their aim, which gives you even more of an advantage and puts you in an ability to, even though they have an advantage in holding an angle, you still are going to be able to have that peeker's advantage and still manage these kills with your op against another op. Now, one thing that's incredibly important here to remember, though, is to be able to actually acknowledge what your abilities are and really be able to kind of figure out, are you good against oppers or are you good against riflers? Now, of course, the best oppers are going to be good against both, and ideally you want to be good against riflers and against oppers, but especially when you're newer to aggressive opping, you're going to find that you're going to be better either against riflers or against oppers, and you're going to want to work on that. But recognize, hey, maybe if you have very good crouch peeks and you have very good reaction times, generally you're probably going to be very good against oppers. So what you might want to do is tailor your play to actually playing against oppers. So instead of going towards cat, maybe you go towards mid a little bit more and take these peaks, or maybe you go towards long, where you're probably going to be playing against oppers a lot more than riflers holding that corner at long. Whereas if you're good at hitting these crazy flick shots from close range, or you're good at quick scoping, even though you can't technically, immediately fire as soon as you scope, it's going to be a little bit inaccurate there. But if you're good at scoping in and immediately flicking, or you're great at this counter strafing, where you're moving in one direction, scope in, move in the other, and immediately shoot, which you do need to know against oppers as well, but it's more important against riflers, then maybe you want to go to more rifle-focused areas, where you go, maybe cat on Dust 2 here, or maybe you're more confident on Inferno, which is more of a rifler-centric map in general. So you want to be able to recognize which of these you're good at and be able to kind of focus in and hone in on doing that more often than the other. Now, one thing you do also have to recognize is aggressive opping is going to be so important based on who you're playing and even just the reaction times of who you're playing. So you want to be great at recognizing as early as possible who you can and can't kill, and you have to be able to take your ego fully out of it. Say, I can't kill this guy, I need to stop trying. A lot of people are going to be kind of in this mindset where they can't kill someone and they want to keep trying, and that's just going to put you in a deeper and deeper hole as you go through the half. You have to be kind of removing your ego here, recognizing your ability and what you can and can't do, and working on what you can do and kind of moving in that direction. Now, one thing that's important to remember here is that this is going to be a little bit different in matchmake versus in scrims, because in matchmake, teams are going to be pretty uncoordinated. They're not going to throw too many flashes. They're not going to throw too many smokes. So instead of going this full aggressive setup where you're kind of just rushing at them, and you might do that on CT side a little bit where you can get totally aggressive and kind of do continuous peaks, what you might want to do a little bit more is these kind of semi-aggressive plays where you might flash over mid, wait, and then hold an angle on someone and try and wait for them to repeak, because in matchmake people are going to tend to repeak a little bit more than in scrims, and they're going to repeak without support a little bit more than in scrims where they're kind of playing it a little bit more passively, a little bit more safe. They might not be repeaking these angles. Now, for aggressive Awping on CT side as compared to on T side, where you really do have to take the initiative there and make these peaks and make these crouch peaks and hit some crazy shots, what you want to be doing for aggressive Awping on CT side is actually not very much different than aggressive Awping or passive Awping, sorry, on the CT side, where when you're passively Awping on CT side, you're pretty much just holding angles, waiting for people to peek into you. When you're aggressively Awping on CT side, your main goal really should actually be one of two things. Now, the number one that you want to be trying to do is actually getting aggressively positioned and then holding an angle. So for example, throwing that smoke and then holding an angle like this where you can get a fairly easy kill with them running through lower tunnels and not really make too much of a fuss about, you know, going too aggressive and peeking into people who have an advantage on you. If you can get this aggressive position where you hold an angle, get an easy kill, fall back, you probably want to be doing that rather than this crazy aggression that I'm going to talk about now, which some people will want to do, especially again in scrims where teams are a little bit more coordinated. You won't be able to catch them off guard with these aggressively passive or aggressive hold angles positions as you can in matchmake. What you can do here is you can really focus on your ability to time your peaks. Now, this is, of course, timing is important in aggressive, you know, hold positions Awping as well, or on T-side Awping, but especially this comes into the forefront on CT side when you want to go crazy aggressive, where this is the type of crazy aggressive I'm talking about. You're holding an angle like this and you peek out and try and catch someone with a rifle running up in this area. Now that's pretty insane levels of aggression here, but if you can time it perfectly, or even this type of peek here where maybe you peek into lower once or twice and then you smoke it again and then you kind of try and catch them as they run through lower, you wait to hear them running, and then you kind of peek out when they have their flash out. That's what your kind of goal here is when you're playing these angles. You want to be holding an angle, and then trying to catch them off guard, because even though when you peek a rifler with an op, you will oftentimes be able to catch them off guard. Generally, you'll have an advantage. If they have a flash out, you're going to be able to catch them at even more of a disadvantage to you. And you can get these crazy easy kills, and that should be your goal here. When you're going aggressive, your goal isn't to land insane shots, right? That should never be your goal. Your goal is actually going to be trying to land easy shots, made easy by the fact that you catch them off guard with their pants down. You kind of throw a wrench in the nook here and try and really take them out when they have their flashes out, when they have their knives out, and when they aren't expecting, by, you know, like I said, catching them with their flashes out. So anyways, this is going to actually make you insanely good at carrying your team, even if you don't top frag here, because if you get a frag at the early part of the round, you've not only opened up that round in terms of getting that entry, but you can also fall back, and with an op, if you're also good at passively Awping, you've not only made it a 5-on-4, you've also basically locked down a whole area of the map, and they have to choose a different area to go. So it's pretty crazy how hard you can really carry a team, or how hard you can really shut down an enemy team just by being a good aggressive opper. Especially, you don't really recognize this as much as you might want to, really, is that you can really demoralize teams by playing this type of aggression where you're catching them off guard, especially if you're going aggressive at different areas all the time. Like one round you might go mid, one round you might go cat, one round you might go long. You're really going to start to demoralize them because they can't even avoid you. And if you're having a good game when you're aggressively Awping, you're going to be able to absolutely pick apart a full team and stop them from doing almost anything on the map. So anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope this helped.